What's up, my fellow emo, pop punk, alt rock music lovers? Matrix here, and you are locked into the Matrix Music Review Podcast, the only place to stay up to date on what is going on in the alt rock scene. And we are back with our first episode of 2024. Really excited to just hop on here real quick and talk about some breakout artist potential this year. And then we'll get our first review episode early next week, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, head on over to Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok and follow us at Matrix Music Review. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, whether it be Apple Music or Spotify, leave a 5-star review, like the podcast, share the podcast. Let's continue to grow this little community and everybody can stay up to date on what is going on in the alt rock scene. So today, this is going to be a pretty short podcast, but I want to hop on real quick and talk to everybody about some artists that I have my eye on this year as breakout potential, breakthrough potential, and then just some other artists that really are on my radar, need to be on your radar, and just to keep an eye out for them. They could potentially be doing big things this year. So we're starting out with breakout potential this year. And when I'm talking about breakout potential, I am talking about a potential blast into superstardom where everybody knows who the band or who the artist is, whether that's something like we had last year with Sleep Token or like 2 years ago with Bad Omens. That's kind of the level of breakout that I'm looking at here. So it's an artist or a band that has a pretty significant following already and is kind of showing all of the signs of making that next step so that even casual listeners or non-alt rock fans are going to hear this and say, oh, okay, definitely. I'm definitely interested in what these guys have to say and what this artist is doing. So the first band that I just want to touch on is just somebody that I've been hearing rumblings of kind of consistently, that they're poised to break out. They're the next big band. They're the next Sleep Token, whatever it may be. And that is Imminence. Imminence really makes sense in this spot to me. You know, they definitely have all of the potential to be that next Sleep Token, to be that next Bad Omens, and take that next step this year. You know, I think when you look at breakout potential, one of the ways that you can look at it is kind of the way that Sleep Token did it last year, where they had a pretty quiet early part of the year, and then they burst out onto the scene with a lead single at the end of the year, and then in the beginning of the next year, they've generated all this hype for their new album, and then that new album releases, and everybody just loves the album. It's album of the year, it's whatever it may be, and then they tour, and they sell out tours, and all this different stuff, and I think Imminence has really set themselves up to kind of be that band this year. You know, when we look at the single that they dropped at the end of 2023, Death by a Thousand Cuts, that is an incredible track. It's a track that I actually put on the 2024 playlist just because of when it was released and because I have that much faith in that being one of the top songs of this year, even though it was released at the end of 2023. I think they're really setting themselves up for just this skyrocket of success when this new album drops. They've already kind of scheduled some tour dates out here. They have an album coming. Everything's lining up for Imminence to be that next big band of 2024. And that's why they're a lot of people's picks to be a breakout artist for the alt rock scene this year. When we talk about breakout artists, it's interesting to me that the past 2 years with Bad Omens and Sleep Token, that we've kind of had this trend of almost heavier artists taking this breakout crown. And I think that's why my next prediction could be seen as, well, maybe they already broke out, or maybe this is as high as they can go. But I don't think that's the case with this next artist I'm about to talk about. I think we might be looking at 2024 as the year that Magnolia Park breaks out. Now, I know they had a huge 2023. They did tours, they had albums, they had EPs, they had a ton of collaborations, festivals, all this other stuff. And I really think where my thinking is on this is that I feel like a lot of the alt rock scene and just the music scene in general is kind of waiting for that nostalgia bridge to really take hold and push it back into the mainstream. You know, we got Blink-182 back, we got Fall Out Boy back, we got Paramore back, and they had strong entries and they were making it onto the charts and things like this. But we've never really had that bridge kind of solidified so that some of the newer artists in the scene can really take hold and get pop radio airplay or get hot 100 tracks or top 40 tracks or top 100 albums unless they've already been established in the scene. So I think it's kind of time for that next generation to take hold, and I can't see a band better to do that than Magnolia Park. They have the perfect edgy sound that fits right on radio, but even their album cuts can still draw in some of that underground crowd where, you know, maybe they're not looking for that poppy side or that radio single. Maybe they're looking for something, you know, a little bit heavier, a little bit more grit behind it. And they definitely have kind of perfected doing both. You know, I think we've gotten to the point where with Magnolia Park, whether it's an EP or whether it's an album, we get a ton of songs that have some radio friendliness to it, but then we also have songs that have just this edge and this grit to it. You know, especially when we got EPs and even the Halloween mixtape that we got at the end of 2023, we have a song like Candles that really could be seen as a radio airplay. And then you get a song like Animal, which is just this heavy, hard-hitting track. And sometimes people can probably look at that and say, like, these are two completely different bands, but that's what makes Magnolia Park so special, is that they have that capability and they have that talent to do both and do both very successfully. You know, and when I'm talking about this bridge to this nostalgic era where we had all these different bands, the Fall Out Boys, the Panics, all this other stuff mixed in on radio, I'm not saying that we need to go back to 2009 and it just be this constant rotation of we hear a Fall Out Boy song and then we hear a Rihanna song and then we hear a whatever. But when we have that mixed in and we have more variety in radio airplay, I think that really allows for more bands to get more exposure. And I think that's really what I'm looking for. You know, one of the things that I do with this podcast is I try to introduce new bands, new artists, and really put them out there so that other people know who they are. I mean, I have found numerous artists, numerous bands that when I listen to them, I'm like, this is amazing, this is great, their lyricism's really strong. And then when you go to Spotify, they have like, you know, a couple thousand listeners, which to me is just kind of unfair because they are so talented and they just don't have the platform or the means to get on pop radio or even on XM radio because of just how oversaturated we are with some of the pop music that's out there. And that's not a dig at pop music or anything like that, but it's just kind of the nature of the way that radio has evolved over the years. And I would love to see us get back to just some more variety and give some of these bands a chance to really show that they're good and be able to discover a new band from a radio or something like that. Even if it is in like an Octane setting or an XM radio setting, it would still be a very cool thing to be able to say, oh yeah, I discovered this band on radio, as opposed to having to try and filter through all of the new music on Spotify every week to see if there's anybody new that you haven't listened to yet. That's really my pitch for Magnolia Park to be a breakout artist this year, but I have a couple of more that may not be at the top of everybody's list. They may not be a name that's on everybody's radar for breakout artists, but I think one artist that really stood out to me when I started reviewing and doing things that trying to figure out who could potentially be this artist, that to me, one that really stood out was Games We Play. I'm really considering Games We Play as a dark horse to break out this year because it's kind of been set up really nice to dominate 2024 based off of the album coming out this year, the tour that he's going on just solo, but then also being on the Fall Out Boy tour. That exposure is just perfect. And when you're kind of touring not only with a major artist like Fall Out Boy, but then also touring solo right after that or right with that to be able to showcase this album, which we've already gotten really strong tracks from. That's really how you can push yourself into that next level of superstardom. And that's why I think he's perfectly set up. And the sound, to me, it's got this emo sound. It's got great streaming setup for me. Like, this is the perfect type of music that will see a lot of success on streaming platforms because people are going to relate so much to the lyricism behind it. Phenomenal songwriter. Girl Shaped Crater that just dropped like last week is one of my favorites that I've heard in a long time. I haven't really been able to turn that one off. It's been stuck in my head since it came out. And this is an artist that I really want to see break out because I think once people discover an artist like this, they're really going to connect, and that's really going to help to push him into that next level of superstardom. So Games We Play really sticks out to me as a dark horse candidate to break out in 2024. The next band I'm just going to briefly mention is Silent Planet. I think they have a very high breakout potential, but I don't know how much I can say they're going to break out just because I haven't done a whole lot of research on their potential trajectory. It was just a name that really stood out as they had a really strong album with Super Bloom at the end of last year. I also feel like it's kind of cheating to put a band like Silent Planet on there because I feel like they've done such big things already that they're just kind of waiting for that next explosion, and I don't think it's going to be very far off for them. So I just wanted to mention Silent Planet on here without going into too much detail because I felt like that one was kind of already solidified as a potential. And then the last band that I just want to mention as a potential breakout is a band that debuted in 2023, and that's Sleep Theory. So Sleep Theory is a band that has been kind of flying under the radar to me while also just drumming up a lot of wins. So they had a huge 2023 debut. They've been all over XM Radio and Octane and things like that. And with one EP in, they're making so much noise that I think it's kind of hard to ignore or hard to say that they aren't a candidate to break out this year, especially when they have such a special, unique sound that kind of sets them apart from everybody else. And I think that's what draws people in sometimes. I heard a take the other day that all music is starting to sound alike, and I can respect that thought and respect that opinion, but when you dive deeper into some of the music, then you realize that, okay, like maybe some of the chords or maybe some of the sounds might be the same, but when you really dive into it, it's not the same at all. But that's why people gravitate to a band like Sleep Theory, because they're different and because they have a different sound to them. But what really stands out to me for Sleep Theory is the vocals that they put on all of their tracks. It is phenomenal and phenomenal production to be able to bring out so much in these vocals. I think the first song that I heard from Sleep Theory wasn't even an original version of their track. It was a reimagined one, and I think it was Another Way. And that really stood out to me, that a track like that could draw me in, where it doesn't have the instrumentation behind it. It's more of an acoustic sound. But then when you go and listen to the original version and the regular version that was put out prior to that, it kind of just blows you away. And that's what Sleep Theory did all last year, was every time something new came out, I was just blown away more and more with just their sound and their production and everything. So looking forward to big things from Sleep Theory in 2024. The next group of artists that I'm talking about, I only have 3 for this one, and this is breakthrough artists. So these are artists that, they have a following, and maybe they haven't really dropped a debut album yet, or maybe they're still just trying to garner up more support and more energy behind their tracks. And the big one that I have right away is Between You and Me. I think Between You and Me is set up to really break through even further than they already have. We know that they've established themselves with albums, and we know that last year their track Nevermind was huge, especially for me. But now they're coming to the US to do a tour. I'm really looking forward to that. They're due for an album or an EP or something along those lines after having those 2 really strong singles in 2023 with the previously mentioned Nevermind, and also the track Yeah. And with having a US tour and having those two strong singles, I think that really sets them up to really break through even further along the lines of a Magnolia Park or even a way that like Arrows in Action did last year. I think that really sets them up to be right along those lines. The next band that I want to talk about is probably my top pick for a breakthrough this year, and that's 408. 408 had a huge 2023. Every single one of their tracks that they dropped in 2023 was a smash, at least to me. I think they've really set themselves up for a strong 2024 where, we already have a tour with them coming with We the Kings. I think we're definitely getting either an album or a long EP of some sort in 2024. And they already dropped a single at the beginning of this year already. We already got Hot Mess. So when you start off the year, a couple of weeks in and you already have a really strong single out there, I think you set yourself up for that breakthrough success. And I can't wait to see it. I know it's got to be coming soon where they go on a solo tour and they bring some bands with them. I think that when that happens is really going to set them apart from the rest and really kind of catapult them into that next level of stardom where everybody knows who 408 is, because they are definitely a band that needs to be on everybody's radar if they aren't already. And the last band that I want to talk about is one that just kind of popped onto my radar in terms of a breakthrough, and that is True North. True North has really drummed up a lot of noise recently where their new track Still Enough has just kind of kept popping up along a lot of people's stories, a lot of people's reels, people responding really strongly to it. And I mean, I can't blame it. I mean, the song is super catchy. I love the track to begin with, but this is a artist where their sound kind of belongs in the conversation of breakthrough, where another different sound, at least to me, it sounds a little different than what's out there right now. It's not the standard sounds that everybody's hearing, and I'm really interested to see where all of this potential and see where all of this noise from Still Enough gets them, because I think they definitely have a potential to break through as well. And then the last grouping, I'm just going to list off a couple of names that are artists on my radar that need to be on your radar if they're not already. I've talked about all these bands and artists in the past on podcasts in 23, whether it was albums, singles, whatever it may be. But this is a year where I see big things coming from them. And the first artist I'm going to mention is Jules is Dead. Definitely a lot of potential there. Looking forward to at the end of the month, we get a music video for Spells and Power Thoughts, which was one of my top tracks of 2023. Another band that needs to be on everybody's radar is Friend Circle. You guys know how I felt about Suburban Dictionary album last year and just how I felt about their trajectory as being somebody like a Blink-182 in the scene. Another band that I need to mention for everybody is Cleveland Avenue. I may or may not have touched on them previously, but their new track, Tell Me, is one of the most catchy tracks out and definitely one that I can see a lot of people really liking. So if you haven't heard it yet, the new playlist will be linked in the description of this episode if you've been following along. Control-Alt-Save's not going anywhere. We're just making a new one for 2024 so that we don't have a 600-hour-long playlist for you guys. The other bands that I want to mention are Imbalance. We all know how I felt about that EP last year. I think they're kind of poised to do another EP, album, whatever it may be this year. And that's kind of skate punkish sound is something that I've really been connecting with a lot lately. Maybsomeday is another band that I think is just waiting to be discovered by other people, and once other people start to generate that momentum and push more people towards this band, I think they're going to explode because their sound is amazing. They definitely have, the Sleeping with Sirens type sound. If you've been a fan of them, I think that's one that you could really connect with if you're looking for a newer band with that sound. And then the last artist I want to mention is WALWIN. I think he is super, super talented. Album at the end of last year, Prius Diaries, Prius Diaries was fantastic. It's another refreshing take on pop punk music, and I think everybody's going to love that sound when they discover it. So those last 6 artists are ones that are definitely setting themselves up to be in the conversation for breakthrough next year, and I think there's some artists that need to be on everybody's radar. And look, that wraps it up for us here on the Matrix Music Review podcast. Just wanted to check in and give some breakout potential artists to you guys. We're already working on the first review podcast where we'll talk about Neck Deep's new album, we'll talk about the Green Day album, and we'll talk about the debut album from Charlotte Sands. Looking forward to talking to you guys about that and getting you up to date on some of the singles that are out there. In the meantime, head on over to Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok and give us a follow at Matrix Music Review. The playlist that we're going to be using this year is linked in the description of this episode. Head on over to Spotify and add that to your library. When you're over there, when you're listening to this podcast on Apple or Spotify, leave a 5-star review, leave a comment, let me know some artists that you think are about to break out or break through this year. And as always, make sure you're sharing this podcast with everybody that you know so that we can continue to grow our little community and continue to make the alt-rock scene one of the best scenes to be a part of. And with that, that ends it here for us this week. I'll be back very soon with the review episode. See you guys later.